The sunrise over the Rockies painted the highway in shades of amber and crimson. The kind of morning that made a man forget for just a moment about the weight he carried. 12 Harley-Davidsons rolled in tight formation along Highway 50, their engines a synchronized thunder that scattered the mountain silence. American flags snapped from chrome poles, 50 stars catching the early light. At the head of the column rode Marcus Dalton, 62 years old, gray beard, trimmed close eyes, hidden behind aviator sunglasses that had seen 3 decades of hard miles. The Iron Wolves Motorcycle Club had just completed their 39th consecutive Memorial Day pilgrimage to the Vietnam Veterans Memorial in Washington. 39 years without missing a single ride through blizzards and heat waves and the slow attrition of age that claimed 2 members every decade. Marcus's hands scarred from combat, and 62 winners gripped the throttle with the same certainty they'd held a rifle half a century ago in the jungles outside Da Nang. The weight pressed different now. Less the phantom ache of Lisa's absence, 4 years had dulled that particular blade to something manageable, and more the accumulated burden of names carved in black granite 3,000 miles behind them. Bobby Chen, who took shrapnel meant for Marcus. Tommy Rodriguez, who stepped on a mine during their last patrol. Father Michael O'Brien, the chaplain who'd held Marcus together during 8 months in a bamboo cage, teeth knocked out, ribs broken, but spirit somehow intact. Frank Bear McKenna pulled alongside on Marcus's right, his bike modified with extra suspension to accommodate the cane strapped to the frame. 61 years old, scarred face creased in permanent squint lines, body carrying 40 pounds more than it should, but still solid beneath a leather vest. The POW Maye patch on his back matched Marcus's. Bear's voice crackled through the helmet radio. The words came slow, careful. "Boss, you good?" Marcus didn't answer immediately. The question carried layers Bear would understand without explanation. Good meant ready to face Ashford, the town Marcus had avoided for 6 months. Good meant handling the anniversary of Lisa's death without the bottle or the pills or the gun he'd considered more than once in the first year. Good meant believing there was still purpose in the empty house waiting at the end of this highway. Always. Bear's laugh held no humor. Liar, but I respect it. The radio fell silent. Behind them, the pack maintained formation, 10 more veterans ranging from 58 to 68 bodies ravaged by war and time, but spirits hammered into something that wouldn't bend. Jake Trigger Morrison with his prosthetic left leg, Carlos Red Jimenez with the hearing aid that whistled in the wind, Mike Henderson, whose hands shook from Agent Orange exposure, but could still strip a carburetor blindfolded. They weren't playing at being bikers. This was who they'd become when the world they'd fought for didn't know what to do with men trained to kill, but expected to adjust, blend in, be normal. The Iron Wolves gave them purpose when the VFW meetings felt like watching themselves die slowly over cheap coffee and cheaper patriotism. The highway curved through pine forests that opened suddenly onto the valley where Ashford sat, population 8,000 and shrinking. Marcus felt the familiar tightness in his chest as the town appeared below. Every building carried a memory. The elementary school where Lisa had taught art to 3rd graders who now had grandchildren. The Methodist church where they'd married in 1975, him 23, and terrified her 21, and radiant in a dress her mother had sewn. The cemetery on the hill where a headstone read, Lisa Marie Dalton, beloved wife, 1954-2020. He'd sworn after the funeral he'd never set foot in Ashford again. Too many ghosts. Too much loss compressed into 12 square miles of fading paint and boarded storefronts. But the road always led home no matter how far you ran. Bear's voice again gentler now. "Just for food, we don't stay." Marcus nodded, though Bear couldn't see it. The lie sat comfortable between them. They both knew once you stopped running, you had to face what you left behind. Main Street stretched empty in the Sunday morning quiet, the kind of American small-town stillness that felt like a held breath. Half the shops sat vacant, the hardware store that had been there since 1952, the pharmacy where Marcus had picked up Lisa's pain medication in those final months, the bakery that used to smell like cinnamon and hope. Only Ruby's Diner showed signs of life, its neon sign flickering, open 24 hours, in pink and blue, the same sign Marcus remembered from when he was 17 and dreaming of anywhere but here. The bikes rumbled to a stop in the diagonal parking spaces out front. Marcus swung off first joints, protesting. 62 wasn't old by any reasonable measure, But combat aged you in dog years. The arthritis in his left knee came from jumping out of a helicopter that was 3 feet higher than the pilot said. The constant ache in his lower back traced to 8 months sleeping on bamboo slats in a cell barely large enough to lie down. He removed his helmet slowly, giving the townspeople inside time to process what was coming through their door. Bear dismounted with a grunt, reaching for the cane he pretended not to need except when he did. The others followed a coordinated movement honed by decades of riding together. Leather vests, creaking boots, hitting pavement, the small sounds of men who'd learned to move as a unit when the world turned hostile. Through the diner's plate glass window, Marcus watched heads turn. Conversations died mid-sentence. Forks paused halfway to mouths. The universal human response to the other, the unknown, the dangerous. People saw the patches, Iron Wolves, MC, POW, MIA, various unit insignias, and made their calculations. Bikers equaled trouble in the American imagination, even when those bikers had purple hearts and bronze stars gathering dust in attic footlockers. Ruby Martinez appeared in the doorway before they'd crossed the parking lot. 68 years old, steel gray hair pulled back in a bun, face lined from 7 decades of Colorado sun and 40 years of smiling at customers who sometimes didn't deserve it. She'd owned this diner since 1984, back when Ashford still had a future. Her expression shifted through surprise recognition, something softer that might have been relief. "Marcus Dalton, thought you'd forgotten us." He stopped at the door, meeting her eyes, brown and sharp and carrying their own catalog of damage. "Never could forget this place, Ruby." She stepped forward and embraced him, the kind of hug that acknowledged loss without trying to fix it. She'd been at Lisa's funeral, standing in the back, one of 24 townspeople who'd shown up to say goodbye to the art teacher who'd touched more lives than she'd ever know. When she pulled back, her eyes were wet. "You boys hungry?" Bear grinned, the expression transforming his scarred face into something almost gentle. "Starving, ma'am. Been living on truck stop coffee and lies for 12 hours. Ruby laughed and held the door. The Iron Wolves filed in, Marcus last. The interior hadn't changed: checkered linoleum floor, red vinyl booths patched with duct tape, a counter with chrome stools that spun if you weren't careful. Patsy Cline on the jukebox, same songs that had played when Marcus was young enough to think life was simple. The walls displayed Ashford's history in sepia photographs: the coal mine that closed in 1979, the Main Street Parade from 1956, the volunteer fire department posing in front of their engine in '63. One photo stopped Marcus cold. He'd forgotten Ruby kept it. His wedding day, October 12, 1975. Marcus in his dress blues, Lisa in her mother's wedding dress, both of them impossibly young and stupid with hope. They'd held the reception here, Ruby serving fried chicken and mashed potatoes to 40 guests who drank too much and danced too long and swore eternal friendship the way young people do before life teaches them about entropy. Ruby touched his shoulder as she passed. She loved this place. Said it reminded her that good things still happened in the world. Marcus couldn't speak past the sudden tightness in his throat. He nodded and moved toward the back booth, the one that gave him sight lines to both doors and all the windows. Old habits trained into muscle memory in a jungle where looking away for 3 seconds could mean dying without seeing who killed you. The diner's other patrons watched the bikers settle in with the wariness reserved for apex predators in enclosed spaces. 2 elderly couples in their 70s dressed for church. A trucker at the counter working through a stack of pancakes. A deputy sheriff in the corner booth, young enough to be Marcus's grandson, hand resting near his service weapon in that casual way that meant he was nervous, but trying not to show it. Bear noticed and leaned close, voice low. "Kid's scared of us." Marcus glanced at the deputy. Fresh face, pressed uniform, probably been on the force 6 months. "He doesn't know any better." "Want me to go say hello? Show him we're friendly." "Sit down, Bear. We're here for food, not therapy." The swinging kitchen door opened, and a young woman emerged, coffee pot in hand, professional smile locked in place despite the tremor in her fingers. She wore a white button-down shirt with long sleeves despite the heat, black slacks, sensible shoes worn down at the heels. A name tag pinned over her heart read Sarah, in Ruby's careful handwriting, with a small painted flower in the corner, hand-drawn, the kind of detail that spoke to an artistic soul trying to survive in a world that didn't value art. Marcus watched her approach and felt something shift in his chest. Recognition that had nothing to do with ever meeting this woman. He knew that walk, the careful, measured steps of someone always calculating the distance to the nearest exit, the way her eyes darted to the door every 10 seconds, keeping track of who came and went. The tension in her shoulders carried high and tight like armor that had become permanent. Her name tag said Sarah, but her body language screamed victim. She stopped at their table, smile still fixed. "Welcome to Ruby's. Can I start you gentlemen with some coffee?" Her voice held the false brightness of someone performing normalcy. Marcus had heard that tone from shell-shocked Marines, trying to convince themselves they were fine. Everything was fine, the screaming would stop eventually. Bear ordered for the table coffee all around, then they'd look at menus. Sarah nodded and turned toward the counter. As she reached up to grab cups from the shelf, her sleeve rode up 3 inches. The bruise on her wrist stood out purple-black against pale skin, distinctive finger marks where someone had grabbed hard enough to burst blood vessels. She noticed Marcus watching and tugged the sleeve down, fast, the gesture so practiced it had become automatic. Bear's voice dropped to a whisper. "You see that?" Marcus kept his expression neutral, years of poker practice in foxholes and prison cells. "I see it. We doing something about it?" The question hung in the air between them. Doing something meant breaking the rule Marcus had lived by since founding the Iron Wolves in 1980. They were a veterans support group, not vigilantes. They organized charity rides, raised money for VA hospitals, helped brothers transition back to civilian life. They didn't get involved in other people's domestic situations, no matter how wrong those situations looked. But Lisa's voice echoed in his memory, soft and insistent. The conversation they'd had 3 months before she died when she'd made him promise something he'd been trying to keep ever since. "Marcus, you can't save everyone. I know. But promise me you'll keep living, not just surviving. Promise me you'll find purpose again. Promise me you won't let the darkness win." He'd promised. Held her hand while the morphine dragged her under. Kissed her forehead and promised he'd do more than exist in the empty house surrounded by her paintings and her books and her absence. Sarah returned with coffee, hands shaking just enough that the cups rattled in their saucers. She set them down carefully, producing a notepad from her apron. "Do you need a few minutes with a menu or—" A fork clattered to the floor 2 booths over. Sarah flinched like she'd been struck. Whole body tensing, one hand moving to her ribs in a protective gesture that spoke volumes about where the next bruise hid. She recovered fast, bending to retrieve the fork, movements stiff like they hurt. Marcus studied her face while she wasn't watching. Late 20s, maybe 30. Pretty in a way that would have been striking if fear hadn't carved permanent lines around her eyes. Dark hair pulled back in a messy bun, makeup heavier than the Ashford morning required, probably covering more bruises. A cheap wedding band spun loose on her finger, the kind bought at a pawn shop or from a gumball machine, as an afterthought. When she straightened, their eyes met for 3 seconds. In that brief window, Marcus saw everything he needed to know. The silent plea, the desperate hope that anyone would notice what was happening behind the performance of normalcy. The terror that speaking up would make everything worse. He'd seen that look before in the eyes of Vietnamese villagers caught between the Viet Cong and American forces, knowing that choosing either side meant death, but doing nothing also meant death. The paralysis of impossible choices. Ruby appeared from the kitchen, wiping her hands on her apron. She glanced at Sarah, then at Marcus, and something passed between them. Recognition between survivors. Ruby knew these signs because she'd worn them once. The old woman moved to Marcus's booth and sat without invitation, keeping her voice low. "She's been working here 3 months. Good girl. Scared girl." Marcus sipped his coffee, letting the bitter heat ground him. "Her husband, Jake Hoffman, used to be deputy sheriff. Lost his badge last year. Found the bottle instead." The name triggered a vague memory. Jake Hoffman. Something familiar there, but Marcus couldn't place it. "She tell you anything?" Ruby shook her head, the gesture carrying decades of frustration. "Doesn't have to. I know the signs. Wore them myself 40 years ago." Marcus looked at Ruby properly for the first time in 4 years. He'd known her since childhood, but never known this part of her story. She met his gaze steadily. "My first husband, Frank. Good man when he was sober. Monster when he drank. Took my brother coming home from Vietnam and putting Frank in the hospital before it stopped. Frank left town. Divorce came through 6 months later. She paused. My brother did 3 years for aggravated assault, worth every day. Ruby, I'm not asking you to do anything, Marcus. Just telling you what I see. That girl wears long sleeves in August. She flinches at loud noises. She watches the door like something's coming for her. Ruby stood. You do what you think is right. You always have. She walked back to the kitchen, leaving Marcus with the weight of a decision he didn't want to make. Bear watched him across the table. Boss, not our business. Since when has that stopped us? Before Marcus could answer, the diner door opened and a pickup truck's engine rumbled in the parking lot. Sarah's entire body went rigid, color draining from her face. Her hand moved to her stomach in a protective gesture that lasted a fraction of a second before she forced herself to relax, smile returning like a mask she'd practiced wearing. Jake Hoffman walked in, and Marcus understood immediately why the name had triggered recognition. 2 years ago, McGinty's bar a fight that had started over nothing and escalated to everything. 3 drunk locals had taken exception to bikers drinking in their establishment. Fists flew, a knife appeared. Marcus had been on the losing end until someone unexpected stepped in, an off-duty sheriff's deputy, who broke the fight up, sent the locals home, let the bikers leave without calling it in. Jake Hoffman, younger than sober, still carrying himself with the authority of a badge. The man who walked into Ruby's diner bore little resemblance to that version. 6'2" and powerfully built muscles, too defined for someone who didn't work out compulsively. Steroids, Marcus's experienced eye noted. Tight white t-shirt showing off physique, jeans, boots, swagger that belonged on a teenager, not a man in his mid-30s. Jake spotted Sarah, and his face transformed into something that might have been affection in another context. But Marcus recognized predatory behavior from his time in the jungle. The way Jake moved toward her hand, already reaching claiming ownership before he'd crossed 5 feet. Hey, baby, thought you were working till 3. His hand found her waist gripped too tight. Sarah winced and tried to cover it with a smile. I am. Just lunch rush. Missed you. The words carried edges. Jake's gaze swept the diner, cataloging the bikers with the paranoid assessment of someone who saw threats everywhere. When his eyes locked on Marcus, something flickered there. Recognition, maybe. Hostility, definitely. Something I can help you with, old-timer. Marcus held the eye contact, letting the silence stretch. In combat, the first person to speak usually lost. Jake's face darkened as the seconds ticked past, and Marcus gave him nothing. No fear, no challenge, just the flat assessment of someone calculating exactly how a fight would go and not liking the other guy's odds. Jake turned away, first breaking the stare. A small victory that meant nothing, except Marcus had 40 years of learning when to stand his ground. Ruby, Jake's voice carried the entitled bark of someone used to getting his way. Get me my usual. Ruby emerged from the kitchen, her expression neutral in a way that required effort. You know the rules, Jake. No tabs. I'm good for it. Not according to my ledger. You're 300 in the hole. Jake's face went red, the instant rage of someone whose self-control had been chemically compromised by alcohol and steroids and whatever else he was using to numb whatever he needed numbed. You calling me a deadbeat? I'm saying pay your tab before running up another one. The tension in the room ratcheted higher. The elderly couples stopped eating. The trucker at the counter swiveled on his stool, ready to bolt. The young deputy stood, hand definitely on his weapon now. Marcus rose from the booth, movement slow and deliberate. He pulled a 20 from his wallet and walked to the counter, placing it down in front of Ruby. His meal's on me. Jake spun, chest puffing. I don't need your charity, old man. Marcus kept his voice level, friendly even. Wasn't offering charity, was offering courtesy. One veteran to another. The change was instantaneous. Jake's aggressive posture softened fractionally. Whatever else he'd become, the veteran identity still held weight. How'd you know I served? Can always tell. Iraq. Yeah, Army, 2nd Infantry Division. Ramadi 2006. UPAMU. Vietnam, Marines, 1st Battalion, 5th Regiment. Jake's entire demeanor shifted. The rage didn't disappear, but respect layered over it. Every veteran Marcus had ever met reacted the same way to the word Vietnam. That war carried mythic weight among those who'd served in later conflicts. The jungle, the attrition, The coming home to a country that spat on them. Semper Fi, Marcus nodded. Ura, an understanding passed between them, the universal language of men who'd seen combat. For a moment, Jake was the deputy who'd broken up a bar fight protecting a brother veteran from locals who didn't understand. Then Sarah brought his food, and the moment shattered. What's wrong with you today? You're acting weird. She set the plate down carefully, hands trembling harder now. Nothing, just tired. Jake's right hand shot out and grabbed her wrist, the same bruised wrist Marcus had spotted earlier. Sarah gasped a small sound of pain she tried to suppress. Tired? You just work at a diner. What's there to be tired about? He squeezed. Sarah's face went white. She tried to pull away, but Jake's grip tightened, testing how much pain he could inflict before she made a scene. Marcus took one step forward, closing the distance. His voice came out quiet, the kind of quiet that made smart people pay attention. She answered it. Jake looked up, still holding Sarah's wrist. For 3 heartbeats, Marcus watched him calculate whether to push this. Then Jake released her with a small shove that made her stumble. This doesn't concern you. Maybe not, but in my day we treated ladies with respect. In your day, Jake stood chair-scraping. Things are different now, old man. This is my wife. My business. Then maybe you should handle your business better. The words hung in the air like a thrown gauntlet. Jake's face went crimson. He took a step toward Marcus, fists clenching. Bear stood moving into a flanking position. The other Iron Wolves rose as one, a coordinated movement that filled the small diner with the promise of violence. Jake saw he was outnumbered. His hand dropped to his belt where no weapon waited habit from his deputy days. The young cop in the corner moved closer, speaking into his radio, probably calling for backup. Jake's voice dropped to a harsh whisper, meant only for Marcus. This isn't over. He turned to Sarah, grabbing her arm hard enough to leave new bruises. We're leaving. Now. But my shift, now. Sarah grabbed her purse from behind the counter, movements hurried and clumsy. Before following Jake to the door, she looked back at Marcus. Their eyes met again, and in that moment, Marcus saw the silent plea crystallize into something more desperate. Not just notice me, save me. Then Jake shoved her toward the exit, and she stumbled, catching herself on the doorframe. They disappeared into the parking lot. An engine roared, tires screeched, as Jake's pickup truck fishtailed out onto Main Street, going 40 in a 25-zone rage, driving more than Jake's right foot. Ruby appeared at Marcus's elbow. How long has this been happening? Too long. I've called Sheriff Garrett twice. Sarah won't press charges. Why not? Because Jake knows people. Because she's got nowhere to go. Because she's pregnant. The last word hit Marcus like incoming artillery. Pregnant. The protective hand to her stomach made brutal sense now. Sarah wasn't just a victim. She was carrying a child into a situation that would only get worse. Some women wear their prisons on their skin. Others wear makeup to hide the bars. The thought arrived unbidden, one of those perfectly formed sentences that captured a truth too large for simple words. Marcus filed it away with all the other observations about suffering he'd collected in 62 years of watching the world fail its most vulnerable. Bear moved beside him. What do we do? Marcus stared at the door Jake and Sarah had disappeared through. I don't know yet. Boss. I said I don't know. Marcus turned to Ruby. Where do they live? Ruby hesitated, then pulled out a pen and wrote an address on her order pad. She tore off the sheet and handed it to Marcus. If you're thinking what I think you're thinking, be careful. Jake's got friends. Vincent Callahan's people. Who's Vincent Callahan? You don't want to know. Marcus folded the address and put it in his wallet. The Iron Wolves had finished their coffee in silence, reading the room understanding without being told that plans had changed. They paid their bills and filed out, leaving tips that were too generous because Ruby had been good to them and because money was the only comfort they could offer for witnessing what they just witnessed. Outside, the morning had grown hot. Marcus stood in the parking lot, helmet in hand, staring at the mountains that ringed Ashford like prison walls. Bear stepped close enough that the others couldn't hear. We're not staying, right? We're riding home, letting this go, pretending we didn't see anything. Marcus didn't answer. In his mind, he saw Lisa in her hospital bed 3 days before she died, her hand in his wedding ring loose because she'd lost 40 pounds, her voice barely above a whisper. Promise me you won't let the darkness win. He'd promised, And then she'd closed her eyes, and when she opened them again, she didn't recognize him. The tumor had taken everything by then. But that promise remained the last coherent thing she'd asked of him. Bear read his silence correctly. Damn it, Marcus. We're not crusaders. We're old men who ride motorcycles and raise money for the VA. We're not equipped for this. Marcus swung onto his bike, started the engine. Then we get equipped. Meeting at the clubhouse, 1 hour. He rode away before Bear could argue, because arguing would mean confronting the fact that this was a terrible idea that would probably end badly for everyone involved. But terrible ideas had defined in Marcus's life. Volunteering for Vietnam, staying in the Marines through 2 tours, proposing to Lisa after knowing her 6 weeks, starting a motorcycle club for veterans nobody wanted to deal with. Every good thing he'd ever done started as a terrible idea. The Iron Wolves Clubhouse sat on 5 acres outside town, purchased in 1987, with money from VA disability checks pooled together. A main building that had been a barn once converted to meeting hall and common room. 3 outbuildings for storage vehicle maintenance and what they euphemistically called private business. Chain link fence around the perimeter. Motion sensors, security cameras. Not because they were paranoid, but because they'd learned in combat that the worst day of your life always started when you weren't paying attention. Marcus arrived first, parked his bike, and went inside. The main room held mismatched furniture, scavenged from yard sales and dumpsters, couches with springs, showing card tables, folding chairs, a pool table with a torn felt. Photographs covered the walls. The club's founding members in 1985 charity rides going back 3 decades, brothers who'd passed on to whatever came next. Lisa appeared in several photos smiling beside Marcus at various events, the only non-veteran allowed full club privileges. He stared at her picture from 2015, some charity function where they'd raised $12,000 for the children's hospital. She'd worn her favorite blue dress. She'd been healthy, then unaware that cancer cells were already multiplying in her brain, building the pressure that would steal her coordination first, then her speech, then her memory, then everything. Bear limped in cane, tapping against the concrete floor. You want to tell me what we're doing? Marcus turned from the wall. We're going to help her. Help how? We're not social workers. We're not cops. We're old bikers with bad backs and worse attitudes. We're men who know how to fight, who remember what it's like to be helpless and praying someone gives a damn. Bear lowered himself into a chair, leg clearly bothering him. Vietnam was 50 years ago, and I still remember every second of it. You remember too, that cage we lived in, wondering if anyone would come, if anyone even knew we were alive. The silence stretched between them, heavy with shared history. 8 months in a bamboo cage barely large enough to lie down. Dysentery, beatings, the constant fear that today would be the day their captors decided American prisoners were too much trouble to keep alive. And then the rescue helicopters, gunfire Marine raiders crashing through the jungle like avenging angels. Bear's voice came out rough. We got lucky. Someone came for us. Sarah's not going to get lucky. She's going to die in that house or disappear into whatever operation Vincent Callahan runs, unless someone decides to care. The other Iron Wolves arrived in groups of 2 and 3 bikes, rumbling into the compound. They gathered in the main room, sensing this wasn't a regular meeting. Marcus waited until all 11 were present, then laid out what he'd seen at Ruby's. The bruises, Jake's behavior, Sarah's fear, the pregnancy that changed everything. When he finished, Deke spoke first. 64 years old Vietnam vet who'd lost a daughter to an abusive relationship 10 years ago. She'd survived barely after her boyfriend put her in the hospital with a fractured skull. The boyfriend served 3 years and got out. Deke never talked about it, but everyone knew why his daughter lived in California now and never visited. Boss, this is big. We're talking about inserting ourselves into domestic violence. Police jurisdiction. I know. We could get arrested, charged. I know that too. Red shifted in his seat, 59 years old Gulf War veteran with hearing aids that whistled when the wind blew wrong. My sister ran a women's shelter in Denver for 15 years. She told me stories that would make you sick. The system doesn't work for women like Sarah. Restraining orders are paper, shelters are full, cops can't arrest without victim cooperation. By the time the system does anything, women are dead. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the room. Every man present had a story: sister, daughter, niece, friend who'd been trapped in a relationship that looked fine from outside, but was slowly killing them. Marcus let them talk themselves into it. Leadership meant knowing when to push and when to let momentum build on its own. After 10 minutes, he raised his hand for quiet. I'm not ordering this. Anyone wants out, walk now, no judgment. But if you stay, you're volunteering for something that could cost us everything. Nobody moved. Marcus felt something warm expand in his chest. Pride, maybe, or the bitter satisfaction of knowing he'd found his people 40 years ago, and they'd stayed his people through every test. All in favor of helping Sarah, 12 hands rose. Then let's make a plan. They spent the next hour strategizing like the combat veterans they were. Phase 1 verified the situation. Just because they'd seen bruises didn't mean they understood the full picture. Bear and Mike would do drive-bys of Jake's house, document what they could. Phase 2, make contact with Sarah, confirm she wanted help. Ruby would facilitate. Phase 3, extraction, when the opportunity presented itself. What they didn't plan for was Jake's 17-year-old brother showing up at the clubhouse at 11:30 that night. Tommy Hoffman was tall, gangly, with his brother's build, but none of the menace. He rode a bicycle into the compound, called out for Marcus. Waited with the nervous energy of someone who'd made a decision but wasn't sure it was the right one. Marcus met him outside, wary. Can I help you? Tommy's voice cracked with youth. You're the bikers from Ruby's, the ones who stood up to Jake. I'm Marcus. What do you need, son? I need you to save my brother's wife before he kills her. The words tumbled out fast, propelled by desperation. Tommy explained that he lived 3 houses down from Jake with their mother. He heard the fights through open windows, saw Sarah's car at the Gateway Motel some nights when she couldn't face going home, watched his brother transform from decorated veteran to monster over the course of 18 months. Why come to us? Tommy's eyes filled with tears. Because I tried going to the police. Sheriff Garrett said there's nothing he can do without Sarah pressing charges. I tried talking to Jake. He threw me through our mom's screen door. He wiped his face with the back of his hand. I'm 17. I can't fight him. But you guys, you're not scared of him. Marcus studied the kid, saw himself at that age desperate to do something, anything to fix problems too big for him to handle. Where's Sarah now? The motel, the Gateway on Route 50. She's sleeping in her car because she can't afford a room and she can't go home. Jake's passed out drunk. It's his pattern. Beat or drink himself unconscious, wake up and pretend it never happened. Marcus glanced at Bear, who'd been listening from the doorway. We go now. Bear nodded. We go now. They rode in pairs, Marcus and Bear, on bikes' headlights, cutting through the darkness. Tommy gave them the location and pedaled home, extracting a promise that Marcus would call him tomorrow with an update. The Gateway Motel crouched at the edge of town, one of those places that charged by the hour and didn't ask questions. 12 rooms, neon vacancy, sign buzzing with dying bulbs. The parking lot held 4 vehicles, 3 of them probably belonging to people engaged in activities they couldn't conduct at home. The 4th was a Honda Civic with a bumper sticker that read, Art feeds the soul. Sarah sat in the back seat, curled up with a jacket for a blanket. Marcus knocked gently on the window. She jerked awake, terror flooding her face until she recognized him. She rolled down the window, confusion and relief battling in her expression. What are you doing here? Making sure you're okay. I'm fine. The lie sat transparent between them. Marcus had heard that particular lie from Marines whose intestines were falling out, who insisted they were fine, just fine. Someone else needed the medic more. No, you're not. Sarah's face crumpled. The performance of normalcy collapsed, and she started crying deep, wrenching sobs that shook her whole body. Marcus opened the car door and sat on the edge of the seat, close enough that she could reach for him if she wanted, but far enough that he wasn't crowding. She cried for 5 minutes while Marcus waited, patient in the way only combat veterans learn to be patient. Some things couldn't be rushed. When the sobs subsided, Sarah wiped her face with her sleeve. How did you find me? Your brother-in-law told me. Tommy, he shouldn't have. He's worried about you. We all are. You don't even know me. Marcus chose his next words carefully. I know enough. I know you're in danger. I know you're scared. I know you think you have nowhere to go. Fresh tears spilled down her cheeks. I have no family, no money. And Her hand moved to her stomach in that unconscious, protective gesture that broke Marcus's heart. I'm pregnant. I know. Ruby told me. Does everyone in this town know my business? Small towns, everybody knows everything. Marcus paused. I have a place. Small apartment above my garage. It's not much, but it's safe. You're welcome to it. Sarah stared at him like he'd spoken a foreign language. Why would you do that? Because 50 years ago I was a prisoner, and a group of men I didn't know risked their lives to save me. I've been paying that debt ever since. Freedom isn't given. It's taken, and sometimes it's fought for by men who know the cost of losing it. Sarah shook her head. I can't. Jake would find me. And Vincent. Who's Vincent? Her face went even paler. Vincent Callahan, Jake's boss. He owns half this town. Sheriff Judge half the businesses. Jake owes him $80,000. Gambling debts. Vincent said if Jake doesn't pay. She looked away, unable to finish the sentence. Marcus kept his voice steady, not showing the rage building in his gut. Vincent said what? He said I could work off the debt. He owns a place outside town. A place where girls, she couldn't say it. A brothel. She nodded, still not looking at him. Jake said if I don't keep him happy, if I leave, if I cause trouble, he'll give me to Vincent to pay what he owes. Marcus felt the familiar combat clarity descend. The moment when chaos resolved into simple geometry, enemy, their friendlies here, objective straight ahead. This wasn't complicated. A young woman was being threatened with human trafficking by her husband and his employer. The solution was equally simple: remove the threat. That's not going to happen. Sarah finally looked at him. How can you stop it? Vincent owns everything. He owns the police, the courts, everything. He doesn't own me, and he doesn't own the 12 men I rode in here with. But what can you do? Marcus stood his knees, protesting. More than you think. Get some sleep. Tomorrow morning, call in sick to work. I'll come get you at 9. We'll move you to the safe house, then we'll figure out the next steps. Marcus, I don't even know you. Why are you helping me? He looked down at her, this frightened young woman who reminded him so much of Lisa in the weeks after they'd met when she was still healing from her own demons. Because Lisa would want me to, and because I promised her I'd keep living, not just surviving. This is me living. He walked back to where Bear waited on his bike. As they rode away, Marcus saw Sarah in his mirror, standing outside her car, watching them disappear into the night like she wasn't sure they'd been real. Bear's voice crackled through the helmet radio. You know this is going to get ugly. I know. Vincent Callahan's not some drunk in a bar. He's organized, connected. I know that too. And we're still doing this. Marcus thought about 8 months in a bamboo cage. Thought about the Marine raiders who'd crashed through enemy lines to pull out prisoners nobody was sure even existed anymore. Thought about Lisa making him promise to find purpose again. We're still doing this. They rode through the Ashford night, 2 old men on motorcycles heading toward a fight they probably couldn't win against an enemy they didn't fully understand. But some fights were worth having, even when the odds were bad. A man can run from his past, but his past knows the road home better than he does. Marcus had spent 6 months running from Ashford, from memories from the empty house where Lisa's ghost waited. In every room, but the road had led him back, and maybe this was why. Maybe this was the purpose Lisa had made him promise to find. Save the girl, stop the monster, make the darkness lose. Simple, impossible, necessary. The clubhouse appeared ahead, lights blazing, the other iron wolves waiting for his return. Marcus knew that when he walked through that door, he'd be committing them all to a course of action that could end with arrests, injuries, or worse. But he also knew none of them would back down because they'd all made the same promise at some point in their lives. Never leave a brother behind. Never turn away from someone in need. Never let the bullies win. They parked their bikes and went inside to plan a rescue. The safe house had been Lisa's idea originally, back in 2010 when they'd converted the detached garage into an apartment for visiting family that never came. She'd designed it with her artist-eye skylights for natural light, pale walls that wouldn't crowd the small space, a kitchenette compact enough to be efficient, but large enough to feel human. The bed sat under a window overlooking the property's 5 acres open fields where approaching vehicles could be spotted a quarter mile out. Marcus hadn't been inside since Lisa died. He stood in the doorway at 6 in the morning, keys in hand, forcing himself to cross the threshold. Dust covered every surface. Cobwebs draped the corners. The air smelled stale, like a tomb sealed against the living world. He opened windows, letting October mountain air flood through, carrying away 4 years of abandonment. Bear arrived with cleaning supplies and fresh linens, understanding, without being told, that Marcus needed backup for this particular operation. They worked in silence, two old men scrubbing away neglect, preparing sanctuary for a stranger who'd become their mission overnight. By 8:30, the apartment looked habitable. Basic groceries filled the kitchenette, clean sheets covered the bed, towels hung in the bathroom. Bear surveyed their work. She'll be safe here. Motion sensors cover the perimeter. Cameras at 3 points. We can set up rotating watch schedules. Marcus nodded, unable to speak past the tightness in his chest. This room held too many memories. Lisa reading in the window seat she'd insisted on installing. Lisa painting at the small desk. Lisa alive and whole and unaware that cancer cells were multiplying in her brain. His phone rang. Unknown number. He answered. Jake Hoffman's voice came through, slurred, terrified. You took her from me. Marcus stepped outside, away from Bear. You drove her away. Vincent's coming for you, tonight. He's not waiting till morning. The words hit like incoming mortars. Marcus's combat instincts activated immediately, calculating defensive positions, sight lines, potential casualty counts. Why are you telling me this? Jake's voice broke. Because Tommy's right. I'm not my brother anymore. I'm a monster. And I'm sorry. The line went dead. Marcus stared at the phone for 3 seconds, mind racing through implications. Vincent Callahan wasn't giving them 24 hours. He was moving now, which meant everything had to accelerate. He called Bear over. Get everyone here, now. Vincent's coming early. Bear's face hardened into combat readiness. How early? Tonight, maybe sooner. The Iron Wolves descended on the compound within 90 minutes. All 12 members, plus Father Joseph Brennan, the 72-year-old chaplain who'd served with Marcus in Vietnam and never quite managed to retire from protecting his flock. Father Joe arrived on his Harley white collar visible under his leather jacket, a combination that had confused civilians for 4 decades but made perfect sense to anyone who understood that warriors needed spiritual guidance more than anyone. Marcus laid out the tactical situation. 5 acres chain-link perimeter motion sensors that would give them 30 seconds warning. Main clubhouse with brick walls and reinforced doors. 3 outbuildings offering secondary positions. Clear sight lines in all directions. Deke inventoried their weapons. Shotguns, rifles, handguns, legal, all registered, all sufficient to hold off a small army if necessary. They'd learned in combat that superior firepower mattered less than superior positioning and the willingness to hold ground when retreat was easier. Red distributed body armor. 4 vests total, not enough for everyone. Marcus assigned them to the youngest members and those in most exposed positions. When Red tried to give one to Marcus, he refused. Save it for someone who has a future. Red's face tightened, but he didn't argue. They'd learned decades ago that Marcus made decisions, and arguing just wasted time better spent executing. Sarah arrived at 9, looking lost in the vastness of the compound. Marcus met her at the gate, leading her to the apartment. She climbed the stairs, slowly taking in details with an artist's attention, the way morning light slanted through windows, the paint colors Lisa had chosen, the sense of space despite confined square footage. This is beautiful. Her voice carried wonder mixed with disbelief, like she'd forgotten beautiful places existed. It was my wife's project. She wanted somewhere guests would feel welcome. Sarah turned to him. Where is she now? Dead, 4 years, cancer. The blunt words hit her visibly. She reached out, touched his arm. I'm sorry. So am I. He showed her the basics. Food in the kitchenette, clean linens, the deadbolt on the door, and the panic button wired directly to the clubhouse. But most importantly, the windows overlooking the approach roads. Nobody gets within 100 yards without us knowing. Sarah sank onto the bed, hands folded over her stomach. How long can I stay? As long as you need. Marcus, I don't have money. I can't pay you. I'm not asking for money. I'm offering protection. She started crying again, the kind of tears that came from relief rather than grief. Someone had finally built a wall between her and the thing hunting her. The wall might not hold forever, but for this moment she was safe. Father Joe appeared in the doorway, moving with surprising quiet for a man his age. He introduced himself, voice carrying the gentle authority that had comforted dying Marines and terrified Viet Cong in equal measure. "You're safe now, child. These men won't let anything happen to you." Sarah looked between Marcus and Father Joe. "People are going to fight because of me, get hurt because of me." Father Joe settled into the chair by the window. "Not because of you, because men like Vincent exist, and these men refuse to let evil win. You're not the cause. You're the reason." Sheriff Tom Garrett arrived at the compound at 3 in the afternoon, driving his personal truck rather than his patrol car. He stepped out with hands visible, no weapon on his hip, body language broadcasting peaceful intentions. Marcus met him on the porch, wary but respectful. They'd known each other 40 years, served in different units, but overlapping theaters, shared the bond of men who'd survived the jungle. Garrett looked older than his 67 years. The job had weathered him, or maybe just the compromises required to keep it. "Marcus, don't do this." "Do what?" "Vincent called me, said you're harboring a fugitive, that Jake filed kidnapping charges." Marcus kept his expression neutral. "Sarah left an abuser. That's not kidnapping. Jake says she stole money from their joint account." "Did she?" Garrett pulled out a notepad, reading from it with the careful precision of a man who knew every word would be scrutinized later. "She withdrew $500, their entire savings. Jake claims she took it without permission. It's a joint account. She had every right." "Legally, yes, but Vincent's got a judge who sees it differently. Judge Hanson signed a warrant for her arrest. Theft, custodial interference. She's pregnant with Jake's child, so he's claiming parental rights." Marcus felt rage building, but kept his voice level. "Hanson's on Vincent's payroll." "I know, but legally my hands are tied. If I don't execute this warrant, I lose my badge. 2 years from retirement. Marcus, I can't risk your pension." Garrett's face flushed. "That's not fair. Isn't it Sarah's life is worth less than your retirement fund?" The words hung between them like a thrown punch. Garrett looked away, unable to meet Marcus's eyes. "There's got to be another way." There was, but Vincent chose his path. Now we walk it. Garrett climbed back into his truck, shoulders slumped. "Marcus, please. Think about what you're doing." "I have. Go home, Tom. Don't be here for what comes next." The sheriff drove away slowly, a man caught between duty and conscience, choosing the path of least resistance because the alternative required courage he no longer possessed. Marcus watched him go and felt something close to pity. Garrett had been a good Marine once before civilian life taught him that survival meant compromise. Good men sleep soundly because rough men stand ready to do violence on their behalf. But what happens when the rough men are good? The thought arrived fully formed, another observation to add to his collection. Marcus had spent 50 years being the rough man, the one who did what needed doing so others could sleep. Now he was doing it again, and the irony wasn't lost on him that this time the good men included him. Vincent Callahan's convoy appeared at 10 minutes past 8, headlights cutting through the October darkness. 3 black SUVs and 2 pickup trucks, stopping 50 yards from the compound gate. Motion sensors had given them 30 seconds warning. The Iron Wolves were positioned 4 on the clubhouse roof, with rifles 3 in flanking positions in the outbuildings. Marcus and Bear at the main gate with shotguns resting against their legs. Sarah was locked in the basement safe room with Father Joe, the most secure position they had. Before descending the stairs, she'd grabbed Marcus's hand. "Don't die for me." He'd squeezed back. Not planning on it. Vincent emerged from the lead SUV with the confidence of a man who owned everything he surveyed. 58 years old, silver hair, immaculate, wearing a suit that cost more than Marcus's motorcycle. Behind him, 15 men deployed in loose formation, hired muscle mixed with local thugs Marcus vaguely recognized from bar fights and petty arrests over the years. Jake stumbled out of the second SUV, looking worse than he had at Ruby's. Face, puffy eyes, bloodshot movements, uncoordinated. Vincent kept him close, proprietary hand on his shoulder. Vincent raised a megaphone, voice amplified and distorted. "Marcus Dalton, we're here for Sarah Chen. Send her out and this ends peacefully." Marcus's response came without the megaphone, forcing Vincent to strain to hear. "She's not going anywhere. I have a legal document signed by Judge Hanson. You're obstructing justice." "That's not justice. That's a piece of paper signed by a corrupt judge." Vincent's smile held no warmth. "Careful, Mr. Dalton. That's slander against an elected official. But this document, very real. So I'm giving you one last chance. Send her out or we come in and get her. Marcus raised his shotgun just enough that everyone could see it. Then you better bring more men. Vincent's expression didn't change, but his eyes calculated new angles. 15 against 12, but the 12 held defensive positions in the kind of discipline that came from combat experience. Mr. Dalton, there are 15 of us, 12 of you, and you're all old men. This doesn't have to end in bloodshed. You're right. Turn around, leave, never come back. I'm afraid I can't do that. Vincent gestured and his men advanced on the gate. The Iron Wolves raised their weapons. Marcus fired one shot into the dirt 5 feet ahead of Vincent. The crack of the shotguns split the night. Everyone froze. Next one's not a warning. Vincent's face hardened. Whatever game he'd been playing, Marcus had just changed the rules. His voice dropped the pleasant facade. So this is how you want it. Jake, go get your wife. Jake hesitated, swaying slightly. Vincent, maybe we should, now. Jake started toward the gate. Bear stepped into his path. Jake swung clumsily. Bear Duck delivered a body shot that folded Jake in half. He went down gasping. Suddenly, all 15 of Vincent's men raised their weapons. The Iron Wolves responded in kind. Mexican standoff fingers on triggers, everyone calculating who would die first when the shooting started. Father Joe's voice cut through the tension before anyone could fire. He walked out of the clubhouse with hands raised, white collar stark against his black shirt, moving between the two armed groups with the fearlessness of someone who'd faced death enough times to lose his terror of it. Enough, he stopped, in no man's land equidistant from both sides. Mr. Callahan, I'm Father Joseph Brennan, Army chaplain retired. I served with these men in Vietnam. Vincent lowered his weapon slightly. And I'm asking you as a man of conscience to walk away. This doesn't end well for anyone. I don't take orders from priests. I'm not giving orders, I'm giving counsel. Blood on this ground tonight won't wash away. It'll stain everyone, including you. Vincent considered for perhaps 3 seconds. Then he shook his head. Step aside, Father, this is business. Father Joe didn't move. Then shoot me first. Let that be on your conscience when you meet your maker. The standoff held for 10 heartbeats. Then new headlights appeared from the south, approaching fast. Everyone turned. 3 black SUVs with government plates FBI emblazoned on the doors in white letters 3 feet high. Federal agents poured out, weapons drawn, moving with tactical precision that made Vincent's thugs look like amateurs. The lead agent, a woman in her 40s wearing tactical gear and command presence, shouted through her own megaphone. Everyone drop your weapons now, FBI. This is a federal investigation. Confusion rippled through both groups. Nobody moved. The agent repeated the command with more steel. I said now, FBI. Drop your weapons or you will be shot. Gradually, guns lowered. Safeties clicked on. Hands moved away from triggers. The agent, her vest red, Reeves, advanced with her tactical team flanking her. What investigation? Vincent's voice carried genuine confusion. Human trafficking? Racketeering? Corruption? Take your pick, Mr. Callahan. She pulled out a phone, pressed play on an audio file. Jake's voice filled the night, tinny through the speaker, but unmistakable. Vincent's coming for you, tonight. He's not waiting till morning. Marcus's voice responded. Why are you telling me this? Jake's voice cracked. Because Vincent will kill her if he gets her. He's got a place outside town. Girls disappear there. Sarah would be next. Agent Reeves stopped the recording. Jake Hoffman called us 4 hours ago, offered to cooperate in exchange for immunity. Vincent spun toward Jake, who stood slowly wiping blood from his mouth. What, Jake, you little... I'm done, Vincent. I'm done being your puppet. Vincent lunged, but FBI agents tackled him before he covered 3 feet. He fought screaming threats that would be used against him in court. You're dead, Jake. You hear me, dead? Jake faced him, swaying but standing his ground. Maybe, but at least I'll die free. Agent Reeves read Vincent his rights while agents cuffed his men. Vincent's organization collapsed in real time. Men who'd seemed dangerous 5 minutes ago now looked like frightened criminals facing federal time. Jake got cuffed too. He looked at Marcus as agents led him past. Thank you. For what? For showing me what a real man looks like. For reminding me who I was supposed to be. Marcus nodded once. You did the right thing in the end. That's what counts. Will you, will you look after Sarah and the baby? As long as they need me. And tell her I'm sorry. Tell her I'll get help. Real help. And maybe someday, but that's her choice. Not yours. Jake nodded, understanding he'd forfeited all rights to decisions about Sarah's future. The agents loaded him into a separate vehicle from Vincent's. Federal prosecutors would sort out who got immunity and who didn't. Agent Reeves approached Marcus, holstering her weapon. Mr. Dalton, we need to talk about the armed standoff you just orchestrated. Marcus met her gaze steadily. We were defending ourselves on private property. You nearly blew a 3-year investigation. If you'd told us you were investigating, we couldn't. Operational security. But this worked out. Jake's cooperation gave us everything we needed. She pulled out a notepad. Here's what happens now. I'm writing this up as a misunderstanding. No charges for you or your club. In exchange, you testify at Vincent's trial, all of you. We can do that. And one more thing. You stay out of vigilante justice. This was close, Mr. Dalton. Too close. We were protecting an innocent woman. I know, and I respect it. But next time, call us first. Will there be a next time? Reeves's expression suggested she knew better than to answer that question. She handed Marcus a business card. My direct line. You see something, you call. Clear. Clear. The FBI convoy departed an hour later, taking Vincent, Jake, and 14 arrested men. The Iron Wolves stood in the compound watching taillights disappear, adrenaline slowly draining, leaving exhaustion in its wake. Sarah emerged from the basement, Father Joe beside her. She looked at the empty road, then at Marcus. Is it over? Marcus wished he could say yes, but he'd learned in Vietnam that wars never really ended. They just paused while both sides regrouped. For now, Sarah started crying. Not the desperate sobs from before, but the release of someone who'd been holding terror inside for months. Father Joe guided her back to the apartment. The Iron Wolves dispersed slowly, checking weapons, securing the perimeter, running through post-action protocols drilled into muscle memory half a century ago. Bear limped over Kane, supporting his bad leg. That was closer than I like. You and me both. Think Vincent stays locked up. Marcus stared at the empty road. Federal charges, human trafficking. FBI doesn't lose those cases. And Jake depends on how much he cooperates, how good his information is. Bear clapped him on the shoulder. We did good tonight, boss. Saved a life. Marcus nodded but couldn't shake the feeling that they'd won a battle while the war was just beginning. Vincent Callahan didn't build an empire by accepting defeat. He'd regroup, adapt, come back harder. But that was tomorrow's problem. Tonight, Sarah was safe. The baby was safe. Jake was in custody where he couldn't hurt anyone. Small victories counted, especially when you'd lived long enough to know how rare they were. 3 months crawled past like wounded time. Federal prosecutors built their case against Vincent Callahan, while Jake Hoffman occupied a cell in Ashford County Jail, cooperating with every subpoena and interview. Sarah grew visibly pregnant, her body changing, while her mind slowly healed from 18 months of trauma. Marcus visited the safe house daily, bringing groceries, checking security, offering presents without pressure. Some days Sarah wanted to talk. Other days she painted in silence while he sat reading or pretending to read. The apartment filled with her artwork landscapes, mostly mountains and skates in open spaces that spoke to someone rediscovering the concept of freedom. One afternoon in late November, she invited him to stay for lunch. Simple sandwiches, nothing fancy, but the gesture felt significant. They ate at the small table overlooking the property. I've been thinking about what's next. Marcus set down his sandwich. And I want to stay in Ashford, start a support group for women like me. He'd expected her to run far from this town and every memory it held. You sure this place has a lot of bad memories? It also has you, and Bear, and Ruby, and Father Joe. Good people who helped when nobody else would. Maybe I can be that person for someone else someday. Legacy isn't what we leave behind. It's who we inspire to carry forward. The thought crystallized as Marcus watched her, this young woman transforming from victim to advocate. Lisa would have loved Sarah's courage. would have helped her build the support network she envisioned. You're stronger than you think. Sarah laughed without humor. I wasn't strong. I was scared. You were strong. No, you survived. You left. You testified to federal agents. That takes courage I can't imagine. She touched her stomach, 7 months along now. Can I ask you something? Why did you help me, really? Marcus took his time answering, wanting to get it right. Because you reminded me of Lisa. Not the way you look, but the light in your eyes, the kindness underneath the fear. Lisa was abused as a child by her stepfather. When I met her, she was broken, but she healed. She built a life. And when she died, I thought maybe I could help someone else heal in her honor. Sarah's eyes filled with tears. She'd be proud of you. I hope so. I really do. They finished lunch in comfortable silence. As Marcus prepared to leave, Sarah asked him something that stopped him cold. When the baby comes, would you consider being a godfather? He turned surprised. Me. You saved our lives, both of us. I can't think of anyone better to help guide this child. Marcus felt something crack open in his chest, some sealed room he'd locked after Lisa died. The possibility of connection again. Purpose beyond simple survival. I'd be honored. A letter arrived at the clubhouse in December, forwarded from the county jail. Marcus's name written in careful block letters on the envelope, a note reading, "Please read this one." Jake had been writing weekly. Marcus had thrown away the first 6 letters unopened. This one felt different. He opened it while Bear watched curious. The handwriting was neat, controlled, nothing like the drunken rage monster from Ruby's diner. Marcus, I know you probably throw these away. I don't blame you. I'm the last person who deserves your attention. But I need to tell you something about Tommy, my brother. He's been visiting me every week, even though I told him not to, even though I don't deserve it. Last week he told me he's joining the Marines, following your example, not mine. He said you showed him what it means to be a man, to protect instead of control, to serve instead of take. I'm writing because I wanted to thank you, not for me, for him. You saved 2 lives that night, Sarah's and Tommy's. He's going to be someone, Marcus, someone good. Because of you, I'm in rehab here, court-ordered, AA meetings, therapy, the whole program. I don't expect forgiveness from Sarah, from you, from anyone. But I want you to know when I get out 10 years, if I'm lucky, I'm going to spend the rest of my life trying to be the man you showed Tommy men should be. Thank you for not killing me when you had the chance. Jake Hoffman, Bear read over his shoulder. You going to write back? Marcus folded the letter carefully. Maybe, someday, when I figure out what to say. Mercy's easy when it costs nothing. Real mercy is hoping the man who hurts someone you care about actually changes. And if he doesn't, then at least we gave him the chance. Tommy Hoffman arrived at the clubhouse 2 weeks later, 18 now, high school diploma, fresh, wearing a USMC recruiter t-shirt. He carried enlistment papers and nervous energy. Marcus sat with him on the porch watching November clouds gather over the mountains. Heard you're shipping out next month. Yes, sir. Paris Island, then infantry training. Infantry's rough, you sure? Tommy's jaw set with determination that reminded Marcus of himself at that age. I'm sure someone's got to protect people who can't protect themselves. You're going to do fine, kid. Tommy pulled something from his pocket. A purple heart medal, old and tarnished, ribbon faded. I want you to have this, from my grandfather. He was a Marine too. World War II, Guadalcanal. Marcus started to refuse, but Tommy pressed it into his hand. Please, he'd want you to have it. He'd say you earned it, for what you did. Your grandfather earned this storming beaches under machine gun fire. And you earned it standing your ground, protecting my sister-in-law when nobody else would. Marcus closed his fingers around the medal, feeling its weight. I'll keep it safe until you come back from your first deployment. Then it's yours again. Deal. They shook hands. Tommy hesitated, then spoke words that clearly took courage. Will you write to me when I'm deployed? If you want me to. I do. I don't have a Jake's not that guy anymore. Maybe never was. But I've got you, if you'll have me. Marcus felt that sealed room in his chest crack open wider. First Sarah's baby, now Tommy, family assembling itself from broken pieces. I'd be honored, son. They embraced awkwardly, two males trying to navigate affection without manual. Tommy left, eventually climbing onto his motorcycle, a used Harley he'd bought with money saved from working at the hardware store. Marcus watched him ride away and saw himself 50 years ago, young and stupid, with confidence, heading off to war without understanding what war really meant. Bear joined him on the porch. "You're collecting sons now." "Seems that way." "Lisa would have loved that kid." "Yeah, she would." Vincent Callahan's trial began in late January, 5 months after his arrest. Federal courthouse in Denver, media circus outside national attention on a case that exposed corruption networks across 3 states. Marcus and the Iron Wolves drove up in formation, testifying one by one about what they'd witnessed. Sarah took the stand in her 8th month, visibly uncomfortable but determined. The prosecutor, a young woman with the intensity of someone who'd built her career on cases like this, led her through testimony. "Miss Chen, can you describe what Jake Hoffman told you about Vincent Callahan's operation?" Sarah's voice remained steady despite obvious stress. "Jake said if he couldn't pay his debt, Vincent would make me work it off at a place outside town." "Did he specify what kind of work?" "He said I'd be with men for money until the debt was paid." Vincent's defense attorney objected, but the judge overruled. Sarah continued describing the threats, the fear, the knowledge that women disappeared into Vincent's operation and nobody looked for them. Marcus testified next, wearing his only suit, feeling like an imposter in civilian clothes. The prosecutor established his credibility, decorated combat veteran, 39 years, running a legitimate veterans organization, no criminal record beyond a justified self-defense incident in 1998. "Mr. Dalton, why did you get involved in this situation?" "Because a woman needed help, and I was in a position to provide it." "Had you met Sarah Chen before that day at the diner?" "No." "So you risked your life, your freedom for a stranger?" Marcus met the jury's eyes. She wasn't a stranger. She was a human being in danger. Vincent's attorney tried to paint Marcus as a violent vigilante. Marcus didn't deny the violence part, but corrected the characterization. "I'm a man who won't stand by while evil happens. If that makes me violent in your eyes, I'll wear that label proudly." The defense attorney had no response. You couldn't shame someone who'd already decided his conscience mattered more than public opinion. Jake's testimony proved devastating. He described Vincent's empire in detail, the loan sharking, the brothel, the corruption network that reached into law enforcement and judiciary. He cried while testifying, but the tears seemed genuine, the remorse of someone who'd hit bottom and found bedrock. The prosecutor played audio recordings Jake had made. Vincent's voice cold and precise, discussing Sarah like property. "That pretty wife of yours, she's going to work at the ranch." "Vincent, no. Please. She's my wife." "Then pay your debt, or she pays it for you, your choice." The jury deliberated 4 hours, guilty on all counts. Vincent showed no emotion, but his hands clenched white on the defendant's table. Sentencing came 2 weeks later. 45 years federal prison, no parole. Vincent was 58. He'd die in custody if he lived that long. As marshals let him out, Vincent looked directly at Marcus, mouthed 3 words. "This isn't over." Marcus mouthed back, "Yes, it is." Ruby's Diner hosted a private celebration that evening. The Iron Wolves, Sarah, Father Joe Sheriff, Garrett, Ruby herself. Music played, food covered every surface. Relief made people laugh too loud and hug too long. Garrett approached Marcus with a beer humility written in every line of his weathered face. "I should have helped sooner. I knew what Vincent was. I knew what Jake was doing. But you were scared." "Yeah, and that's no excuse." Marcus accepted the beer. "Tom, you helped when it counted. You testified. That's what matters. I've been sheriff 25 years, and in all that time, I never did anything as important as what happened these past months. Then make the next 25 years count. Protect the next Sarah before she needs an old biker to save her." Garrett straightened. "I will. I promise." They shook hands, bearing old disappointment, acknowledging that redemption was possible for people willing to change. Bear got drunk and sentimental, pulling Marcus aside. "Boss, you ever think about settling down again?" "What, getting married?" "Yeah, you're 62. You deserve companionship." "I've got companionship. I've got you idiots." "I'm serious." "So am I. Lisa was my one. I don't need another." "She wouldn't want you to be alone." Marcus looked around the diner, his brother Sarah glowing with impending motherhood, Father Joe blessing the gathering, Ruby serving food with fierce maternal pride. I'm not alone. Look around, I've got family. Sarah tapped her glass for attention. The room quieted. Everyone, I have news. First, it's a girl. I found out yesterday. Cheers erupted. Sarah waited for silence. Second, I've decided on a name. If, if Marcus approves. Marcus felt every eye turn to him. Me, I'm naming her Lily after Lisa, Marcus's late wife. The room blurred. Marcus couldn't speak past the sudden constriction in his throat. Sarah continued, voice gentle. You gave me a future. I want to honor the woman who gave you one. Marcus managed 3 words. I'm very honored. Will you be there when she's born to meet your goddaughter? He nodded, not trusting his voice. Bear clapped him on the back. Father Joe squeezed his shoulder. Ruby hugged him hard enough to crack ribs. We measure our lives in years, but we should measure them in moments like this. The thought arrived with crystalline clarity. Lisa was 4 years dead, but her influence rippled outward, touching lives she'd never meet. That was legacy, not what you accomplished, who you inspired. 2 days later, Marcus made a decision he'd been avoiding. He drove to the federal Supermax prison in Florence, Colorado, 3 hours south, signed in as a visitor for Vincent Callahan, sat in the visiting room with reinforced glass between them, phones for communication. Vincent appeared in orange jumpsuit, still composed despite circumstances. He lifted the phone. Didn't expect to see you here. Wanted to look you in the eye, make sure you're really locked up. Vincent smiled without warmth. You think prison stops men like me? I think 45 years is long enough that it doesn't matter. I've got people on the outside, people who owe me, people I pay, and they'll be watching Sarah, watching you, waiting. Marcus kept his expression flat. For what? For the moment you drop your guard, for the moment you think it's over. It is over. Nothing's ever over, Marcus. You know that. How long were you a POW? 8 months. Yeah. Then you know, the war might end, but the enemy never forgets. Marcus leaned forward. Let me tell you something, Vincent. I survived 8 months in a bamboo cage. I survived losing my wife. I survived 50 years of nightmares and guilt and pain. Whatever you throw at me, I'll survive that too. And so will Sarah. And so will her daughter. Because I'm not alone. I've got brothers who'll die before they let you touch her. And you're alone in a cage for 45 years. So send your people. I'll be ready. Vincent's smile widened, predatory and certain. There's something you should know about Jake. What about him? He didn't flip because of conscience. He flipped because I told him to. Marcus's blood went cold. What? The FBI had me, dead to rights. 3 years of investigation, they were closing in. So I made a deal. I'd give them a conviction. Public trial. 45 years. And in exchange, my real operation stays hidden. You're lying. Think about it. The brothel they raided empty. The ledgers Jake provided old, outdated. The trafficking victims they rescued, paid actresses. My real business untouched. My real money safe. My real associates free. Marcus wanted to call it bluff, but Vincent's certainty planted doubt. I don't believe you. Believe what you want. But in 5 years, when my appeal goes through, when I get released for good behavior and health reasons, remember this conversation. When I get out, I'm coming for Sarah, for her daughter, and for you. That's a promise. Marcus hung up the phone, walking out while Vincent smiled behind reinforced glass. Guards escorted the prisoner back to his cell. Marcus drove home with Vincent's words echoing in his mind, wondering how much was truth and how much psychological warfare. He didn't tell Sarah about the visit, didn't tell Bear. Some burdens you carried alone, but he called Agent Reeves that night. I need to know something. Was Vincent's operation really shut down? Reeves's pause lasted 3 seconds too long. We seized significant assets and arrested. That's not what I asked. Another pause. We're still investigating. These networks have layers, but Vincent's in prison. That's what matters. Marcus thanked her and hung up, understanding she'd told him everything she could without admitting the FBI hadn't caught everyone. Vincent was right about one thing: nothing was ever completely over. But that was tomorrow's problem. Tonight, Sarah was safe. The baby was coming in 6 weeks. Tommy was shipping out to Paris Island. Jake was getting help. Small victories accumulated into something larger. Marcus sat on his porch watching stars emerge over the mountains. Somewhere out there, enemies plotted. Somewhere, evil regrouped. But here now, good people were building lives despite the darkness. Lisa's voice echoed in memory. Promise me you won't let the darkness win. He'd kept that promise. Would keep it tomorrow. And the day after. For as long as breath filled his lungs and strength remained in his hands. The road stretched ahead, uncertain and dangerous. But Marcus Dalton had never walked easy roads. He pulled out Tommy's grandfather's Purple Heart, feeling its weight. Legacy passed forward generation to generation, the endless human struggle to be better than the darkness that chased them all. Tomorrow he'd ride. Tomorrow he'd train. Tomorrow he'd prepare for whatever Vincent sent. Tonight he rested. A warrior between battles, gathering strength for the next fight. Because the fight was never really over. It just paused while both sides caught their breath. 5 years compressed into a rhythm of ordinary days that felt like miracles to those who remembered the alternative. Spring 2029 arrived with mountain snow melting into rivers that fed the valley, transforming Ashford from winter gray to hesitant green. Marcus stood in the parking lot of Hope House watching Sarah unlock the front door movements, confident now, fear replaced by purpose. The building had been a foreclosed bank branch before the Iron Wolves purchased it in 2025. Sarah's vision transformed marble floors and teller windows into something warmer. 12 beds in private rooms, counseling offices, a communal kitchen where residents learned to cook meals that felt like home. The front window displayed a hand-painted sign reading, Hope House Where Tomorrow Begins, with flowers Sarah had added during a weekend when artistic impulses overwhelmed practical concerns. Lily burst through the door at 7:30 sharp, backpack bouncing, pigtails flying. 4 years old and fearless in ways her mother had never been allowed. She spotted Marcus and launched herself at him with complete faith he'd catch her. He did joints protesting, but heart expanding. Grandpa Reaper, Mommy says we're painting mountains today. She'd been calling him that since she learned to talk, mangling Reaper into something that sounded like Weeper but close enough. The other Iron Wolves found it hilarious. Marcus found it perfect. Mountains, huh? Which ones? Lily pointed east where the Rockies dominated the horizon. Those ones, the purple ones. Mountains aren't purple, sweetheart. Or two, when the sun goes down, they turn purple, and pink and orange and everything. Sarah appeared in the doorway laughing. She's got you there. Lisa would say the same thing. Marcus set Lily down carefully. 4 years old, but she'd absorbed enough of Sarah's artistic sensibility to see the world in colors most people missed. They spent Saturday mornings painting together, Lily's attempts growing more sophisticated, Marcus's attempts remaining stubbornly amateur but therapeutic. He studied Sarah properly. 33 now, lines around her eyes from smiling instead of flinching. She'd cut her hair short last year, practical choice for someone running a shelter, but also declaration of ownership over her own appearance. The long sleeves were gone. She wore short-sleeved shirts, now scars visible, past acknowledged but not hidden. Rough night. Sarah's expression shifted to professional concern. New intake, Maria 26, 3 kids. Husband fractured her jaw. She drove 6 hours to get here. She's safe for now, but he's looking, always looking. Marcus nodded. 5 years running, Hope House had taught Sarah what Marcus learned in combat safety was temporary vigilance, permanent. Need extra security. Bear's already on it. Cameras upgraded, panic buttons tested. She paused. Marcus, there is something else. Vincent's parole hearing got moved up. The name hit like shrapnel. 5 years hadn't dulled its edges. Winter. Next week, his lawyers are arguing compassionate release. Cancer. Marcus processed this information with the cold calculation of someone who'd spent 50 years evaluating threats. How bad? Stage 4, pancreatic. 6 months, maybe less. And they want to let him die at home. Yes. Marcus watched Lily chase butterflies across the parking lot, oblivious to adult concerns about monsters who made promises from prison cells. Vincent's words echoed from that visit 5 years ago. When I get out, I'm coming for Sarah, for her daughter, and for you. He won't get parole. Sarah's voice carried doubt Marcus didn't share. How do you know? Because I've been paying attention. Made sure the parole board knows exactly what kind of man Vincent Callahan is. What he didn't say, he'd been preparing for this possibility since the day Vincent got sentenced, documenting every prison violation, every connection maintained, building a file thick enough that no parole board could ignore it without obvious corruption. His phone vibrated. Agent Diana Reeves, now Deputy Director of the FBI's Trafficking Task Force. Marcus, we need to talk. About Vincent Callahan. His hearing was moved up to next week, health reasons. Sarah just told me. There's something you should know. We've intercepted communications. He's still running operations from inside. Marcus stepped away from Sarah and Lily, voice dropping. What operations? Grand Junction, same business, different location. We've been investigating 18 months but can't get enough for a raid without blowing our sources. What do you need? I need you to stay out of it. Let us handle this legally. Marcus said nothing. Reeves read the silence correctly. Marcus, I'm serious. You go rogue, you compromise our case. And if I find evidence you can't get legally, then you call me immediately before doing anything stupid. They both knew he wouldn't promise that. Marcus thanked her and hung up mine, already calculating angles. Bear appeared around the corner, walking better these days since the hip replacement surgery. 66 years old, but the cane was gone, replaced by deliberate movements that managed pain without advertising weakness. Heard Reeves call. Vincent. Grand Junction, still operating? Bear's jaw tightened. We going? Marcus looked at Lily, still chasing butterflies, still innocent. Then at Sarah, who'd rebuilt her life on the foundation of Vincent being locked away forever. We're going. The clubhouse meeting that night drew 23 Iron Wolves, original 12 plus 11 new members, younger veterans from Iraq and Afghanistan, who'd found brotherhood in the MC after civilian life proved harder than combat. Marcus stood before them feeling every one of his 67 years, but hiding it behind command presence honed over half a century. Vincent Callahan is up for parole. He's also still running trafficking operations from prison. FBI knows but can't move without evidence. We're going to get them that evidence. Mike Henderson, now 40 years old with 2 tours in Afghanistan behind him, spoke up. Boss, no disrespect, but isn't this FBI's job? It should be. But sometimes the system moves too slow. Women are suffering right now. We don't have time for proper channels. Deke, 74 in retirement age, but refusing to quit, added his voice. My daughter's still in therapy. 10 years later. System didn't save her. We did. I'm in. Others murmured agreement. The vote was unanimous within 5 minutes. Jake Hoffman's letter arrived the next morning, forwarded from Ashford County Prison, where he'd spent 5 years becoming someone different. Marcus hadn't answered the previous 47 letters. This one felt different, urgency bleeding through careful handwriting. Marcus, I know you don't read these, but I need you to read this one. Vincent's people came to see me last week. Offered money to testify he was innocent, that I made everything up. I refused. They threatened Tommy, said accidents happened to Marines deployed overseas. I'm scared, Marcus. Not for me, for my brother, but that's not why I'm writing. I'm writing because those men let something slip. They're running a warehouse in Grand Junction, Industrial Drive. They call it the Ranch, like Vincent's old place. Girls are there right now. Young girls. Teenagers. I heard them bragging about Mexican girls, easy to control because their families are threatened. I told Agent Reeves. She said she'd look into it. That was 3 weeks ago. Nothing. I think Vincent owns people in the FBI. Not everyone, but enough, please. I know you have no reason to trust me or help me, but those girls need someone. Jake Marcus read the letter twice, cross-referencing details against what Reeves had told him. Everything matched. Jake wasn't lying or manipulating. He was trying to pay forward the mercy he'd been shown. Bear read over his shoulder. Kids trying to make amends. Maybe. Or maybe he's just trying. That counts for something. Marcus folded the letter. Tommy had been writing regularly from Okinawa, letters full of Marine enthusiasm and occasional homesickness. Good kid, deserved a brother who was trying to be better. Get the crew. We're doing reconnaissance tonight. Grand Junction sat 90 miles west, population 60,000, large enough that strangers went unnoticed. Industrial Drive occupied the city's eastern edge, warehouses and distribution centers that operated 24 hours, trucks moving in and out with rhythms that looked legitimate from outside. The Iron Wolves conducted surveillance for 3 nights. Marcus Bear Mike and Carlos Rodriguez Red's nephew, 32, 2 tours in Iraq, trained in reconnaissance. They rotated shifts documenting patterns, photographing vehicles, recording license plates. What they saw confirmed Jake's letter. Young women arriving in unmarked vans, escorted by armed men into a warehouse with no company signage. Drug shipments disguised as legitimate freight. Money drops conducted with military precision. Night 3, a young woman escaped. She came running from the warehouse at 2:15 in the morning, barefoot, bleeding from cuts on her feet. She reached the street and started pounding on car windows, desperate for help. Marcus and Carlos were on watch. Marcus opened the door immediately. "Get in, now." She dove into the backseat, sobbing in Spanish, too fast for Marcus to follow. Carlos translated, his face going hard. Her sister's inside, 15 years old. They were trafficked from Juarez 6 weeks ago. Headlights approached fast black pickup truck, same one they documented all week. Marcus hit the accelerator before the truck could block them in. The chase lasted 7 minutes through empty streets, Carlos returning fire to disable pursuit rather than kill. They lost the truck in residential neighborhoods where speed limits and witnesses forced caution. The woman's name was Elena Rodriguez. 24 years old, bright-eyed despite trauma, fierce protective instincts for her sister Mia, who remained trapped inside Vincent's operation. They brought her to the motel outside town, bought her food and clean clothes, sat patiently while she told her story in broken English, supplemented by Carlos's translation. Promised work permits. Driven across the border in a truck with 14 other women. Held in the warehouse, threatened with violence against families back home if they resisted or ran. Mia kept separate, used as leverage to keep Elena compliant. Marcus listened and felt rage building with familiar heat. 50 years since Vietnam, but the anger at injustice never really cooled. How many girls? Diaz, maybe 12. They rotate, different locations. Guards, 4 at night, 6 during day, all armed. Bear, listening from the corner, spoke the thought everyone shared. "Boss, this is suicide. We're 4 old men against a small army. Then we even the odds." How? Marcus pulled out his phone, scrolling through contacts until he found Tommy Hoffman's email. The kid had given him emergency information when he deployed ways to reach him if something urgent came up. Marcus composed a message carefully using code they'd established for sensitive communications. "Your brother needs help. Family business going bad. Come home if you can." The reply came 90 minutes later, despite the time difference and Tommy being halfway around the world. On emergency leave, 24 hours. Marcus turned to the team. "We've got backup coming. We planned this right, non-lethal if possible. Get the girls out, deliver them to FBI, let them handle arrests." Carlos shook his head. "Boss, these aren't street thugs. They're cartel connected, probably ex-military themselves. Then we outthink them instead of outfighting them." They spent the next day planning like the veterans they were. Entry points, exit routes, communication protocols, contingency plans for when everything went wrong. Elena provided detailed warehouse layout, 12 rooms on the second floor, where girls were kept locked, central staircase, single service entrance in back with minimal security. Tommy arrived at dawn the next day, flying military standby from Okinawa through San Francisco to Denver, driving straight to their motel. 22 years old now. Marine corporal with combat experience in Syria, carrying himself with quiet confidence, Marcus recognized from his own reflection 45 years ago. They embraced briefly, warrior's greeting. "Your brother's trying to make amends. Gave us intel that checks out." Tommy's face showed complex emotions. "Jake's different. Letters sound like he's actually working on himself. People can change if they want to badly enough." "You believe that?" Marcus thought about Jake's confession that enabled Vincent's arrest. Thought about 47 letters trying to rebuild burned bridges. "I believe in giving people the chance to prove they've changed. What they do with that chance is on them." Father Joe arrived that afternoon, 77 now, but still riding his Harley, still carrying the calm authority that steadied frightened souls. He'd brought medical supplies and trauma counseling experience from 40 years helping veterans and their families. "Heard you boys were planning something stupid." Marcus almost smiled. "Rescuing 12 trafficked women from a cartel warehouse. Stupid enough. I've seen worse. 68 Hugh City. That was stupid. This is just dangerous. They gathered in the motel room at midnight. Marcus Bear, Mike Carlos, Tommy Father Joe. Elena insisted on coming despite Marcus's objections. Her sister was inside. No argument would keep her away. Marcus laid out the plan one final time. Entry at 2 a.m. when guard shifts changed and attention was lowest. Silent approach. Disable security, breach. Second floor extract. All girls exfiltrate to waiting vans. Father Joe would handle medical triage and counseling. Tommy and Mike would secure the ground floor. Marcus Bear and Carlos would handle extraction. Elena would identify Mia and calm the other girls. Non-lethal unless there's no choice. We're not executing anyone. Clear. Agreement rippled through the team. They geared up tactical vests, suppressed pistols, flashlights, zip ties for restraints. The equipment came from various sources, some legal, some gray area, all functional. At 2:15, they approached the warehouse. Service entrance unlocked exactly as Elena predicted. Inside, fluorescent lights buzzed over concrete floors stained with oil and darker substances nobody wanted to identify. First guard smoked a cigarette near the loading dock, back turned. Mike took him down with a chokehold, unconscious in seconds. Zip-tied, gagged, hidden behind pallets. Second guard watched television in the break room. Carlos distracted while Marcus disarmed him. 2 down without shots fired. Staircase to second floor stood empty. They climbed single-file weapons ready, each step calculated to minimize noise. The hallway stretched ahead, lined with doors that should have been offices but served darker purposes. Marcus tried the first door. Locked. Keys on the unconscious guard downstairs. Bear retrieved them while Marcus waited, listening to sounds behind doors, crying, praying silence worse than noise. The first door opened onto 3 girls huddled on bare mattresses. Elena spoke rapid Spanish voice, gentle. They emerged slowly, disbelieving, until they saw Elena, in belief replace shock. Door by door, they freed 9 girls at ages 15 to 24, various stages of trauma, but all clinging to hope offered by rescuers who'd appeared from nowhere. Mia? Elena's voice carried desperate urgency. One girl pointed upward. Arriba! Top floor. Top floor meant deeper into the warehouse. More guards, more risk. Marcus made the calculation instantly. Get these 9 to the vans. I'll get Mia. Bear grabbed his arm. Boss, get them out. That's the mission. Tommy stepped forward. I'll go with you. They left the others escorting 9 girls to safety while Marcus and Tommy pushed deeper. Top floor single room at the end of the hall. They approached with weapons raised, expecting ambush. Alarm blared. Someone had discovered unconscious guards. Lights flooded the warehouse. Shouting erupted from below, boots pounding on concrete. Marcus kicked the door open. Mia lay on a bed, 15 years old, chained by one wrist to the frame, barely conscious from whatever drugs they'd used to keep her compliant. Mia, Mia, Elena's voice from below, refusing to leave without her sister. Tommy produced bolt cutters. The chain parted with metallic snap. Marcus lifted Mia, her weight, negligible body ravaged by weeks of systematic abuse. Rage threatened to override tactical discipline, but he forced it down. Rage came later. Now was survival. Gunfire erupted from the stairwell. Bear and Carlos returning fire, covering their exit. Marcus and Tommy ran toward the service stairs, alternate route Elena had mentioned. Behind them, 4 guards appeared, automatic weapons, spitting rounds that chewed through drywall and ancient wood. Bear's voice over the radio strained. Boss, we're pinned down. Fall back to the vans. We're coming out the service stairs. They crashed through the rear exit into pre-dawn darkness. Father Joe had the van, running side door open. Elena reached for her sister, sobbing. Marcus passed Mia over and turned to cover Tommy's 6. 2 guards pursued through the doorway. Marcus and Tommy fired simultaneously, suppressing rather than killing, forcing them back inside. The van accelerated before the doors fully closed, tires screaming on pavement. Behind them, the warehouse erupted in chaos, more guards pouring out vehicles, starting lights, stabbing through darkness. But the Iron Wolves had planned the escape routes carefully. 3 blocks away, they split up vans, taking different paths, regrouping at a prearranged location 10 miles out. Dawn was breaking when they reached the FBI field office in Denver. Marcus's phone showed 14 missed calls from Agent Reeves. He called back while pulling into the parking lot. We've got 12 trafficking victims, who need immediate medical attention and witness protection. Reeves's voice carried fury and relief in equal measure. Marcus, what did you do? What you couldn't. They rolled in with 4 vans, 12 rescued women, and enough evidence to shut down Vincent's network permanently. FBI agents swarmed out medics attending to immediate needs, while Reeves coordinated responses with the kind of controlled chaos that followed major operations. She pulled Marcus aside after the initial triage. You raided a criminal operation, without authorization, without backup. You could have gotten killed. You could have gotten those girls killed. But we didn't. They're safe now. That's what matters. Reeves pinched the bridge of her nose, wrestling with protocol versus results. You're right. God help me, you're right. We've been trying to get enough for a warrant for 18 months. You got us 12 witnesses in one night. So we're not under arrest. I'm looking the other way. This time, last time, clear. Marcus nodded, though both of them knew he'd do it again if circumstances required. Vincent, parole hearing is tomorrow. This evidence guarantees denial, but Marcus, she hesitated. We intercepted another communication. Coded. From Vincent to someone on the outside. What did it say? Project Lily. Execute now. The blood drained from Marcus's face. Project Lily. Sarah's daughter. His goddaughter. When message sent 4 hours ago, we don't know if it's been acted on. Marcus ran for his bike before Reeves finished speaking. Bear caught up, already calling the clubhouse for emergency mobilization. The ride back to Ashford took 90 minutes that felt like hours. Marcus pushed the Harley harder than wisdom allowed, age and caution abandoned for raw speed. His phone showed 3 missed calls from Sarah, 2 from Ruby, none from Hope House, where Lily should have been safe. He called Sarah. She answered on the first ring, voice tight with controlled panic. Marcus, where are you? 90 minutes out, what's wrong? Someone tried to grab Lily from preschool. Teacher fought them off, called police. We're at the clubhouse behind locked gates, but Marcus, they're still out there. Stay inside. Arm everyone, I'm coming. He hung up and radioed the Iron Wolves. Vincent ordered a hit on Lily. Everyone converge on the clubhouse. Now. The response was immediate. 23 voices confirming bikes peeling off from various locations, brothers dropping everything to defend family. Marcus reached Ashford at 9:40 a.m. The clubhouse sat quiet. 2 quiet gates closed and chained. He radioed ahead. Bear, open up. Boss, we've got hostiles. 3 vehicles parked down the road. Been there 20 minutes. Marcus approached cautiously. 3 black SUVs sat 500 yards from the clubhouse entrance, occupants visible but not advancing. Waiting for something, orders maybe, or nightfall when advantages shifted. He pulled through the gate, which closed behind him immediately. Inside the compound, organized chaos reigned. Iron Wolves in defensive positions. Sarah and Lily in the basement safe room with Father Joe. Armed watch on every rooftop. Bear met him in the main room. They showed up 30 minutes ago. Haven't moved since. I think they're waiting for more backup. How many? 3 per vehicle, 9 total. Could be more coming. Marcus calculated odds and didn't like them. 9 trained shooters against 23 defenders sounded favorable until you factored in that the Iron Wolves averaged 63 years old and the shooters were probably cartel enforcers in their 20s. Sheriff Garrett's patrol car pulled up outside the gate. He stepped out, hands visible, radio in one hand. Marcus, I need to talk to you. Marcus walked to the gate, weapon holstered but accessible. Tom, there's a warrant for Sarah Chen. Judge Hanson signed it yesterday. Kidnapping charges. Jake Hoffman claims she abducted his daughter. That's bullshit. Jake's in prison. He wouldn't. Vincent filed it in Jake's name. Legal technicality, but it holds. Those men out there, they've got the warrant. They're legally executing a court order. Marcus studied his old friend's face, seeing the same conflict that had paralyzed Garrett 5 years ago. You going to enforce it? Garrett met his eyes. I'm going to do my job, which is making sure nobody gets killed over a piece of paper I know is fraudulent. He raised his radio. But I can't do that if shooting starts. Then make those men leave. I can't. They've got a legal document. You want to fight this, fight it in court. Courts are where Vincent wins. He owns judges. Not all of them. Enough. They stared at each other across decades of friendship strained by impossible choices. Garrett broke first. "Don't do this, Marcus. There's got to be another way." There was, but Vincent chose this path. Marcus turned away, walking back to the clubhouse. Behind him, Garrett radioed for backup, doing his job even when his job served injustice. The standoff lasted 4 hours. More vehicles arrived, Vincent's men reinforcing until 15 total surrounded the compound. Law enforcement showed up but couldn't intervene without escalating. Media heard about the situation and descended with cameras and helicopters broadcasting nationally what local corruption had tried to hide. Inside the safe room, Lily sat in Sarah's lap, confused but trusting that adults would fix whatever was wrong. Father Joe told her stories about brave knights and protective dragons, keeping her mind occupied while the adult world resolved itself. Marcus stood in the main room reviewing options. Surrender meant Sarah and possibly Lily disappearing into Vincent's system before real law enforcement could intervene. Fight meant bloodshed that would traumatize Lily regardless of outcome. Wait meant giving Vincent time to coordinate more resources. No good choices, just varying degrees of terrible. Agent Reeves called at 2 p.m. "Marcus, I'm watching this on CNN. Stand down. We're handling it." "How by?" "Federal warrant supersedes state. We're coming in with FBI tactical to take custody of Sarah and Lily. Witness protection pending Vincent's trial." "Vincent's dying. Trial won't happen before he's dead." "Then they stay in protection until the threat is eliminated." "Marcus, this is the only way that doesn't end in a gunfight." He wanted to argue but recognized truth when it appeared. The FBI arriving meant Vincent's men had to back down or face federal charges. It was the exit strategy he couldn't create on his own. "How long?" 90 minutes. Can you hold that long?" Marcus surveyed his brothers, 60 and 70-year-old men who'd been holding positions for 4 hours. Joints stiffening, backs aching, determination unwavering. "We'll hold." The FBI arrived in force at 3:30, tactical teams, armored vehicles, helicopters. Agent Reeves personally walked to the gate, megaphone in hand. "This is FBI. All parties stand down. We're taking custody of Sarah Chen and her daughter under federal protective witness protocols." Vincent's men tried to assert their state warrants' validity. Reeves shut them down with federal authority that superseded local corruption. Sheriff Garrett looked relieved to have the decision taken out of his hands. Sarah emerged with Lily, Father Joe escorting them. Lily saw the FBI agents in armored vehicles and helicopters, and her 4-year-old mind processed it as exciting rather than terrifying. "Mommy, are those the good guys?" Sarah's voice cracked. "Yes, baby. Those are the good guys." She looked at Marcus standing in the compound, memorizing his face like she might never see him again. He wanted to promise everything would be fine, but promises felt hollow when threats came from dying men with nothing left to lose. Lily waved at him as FBI agents guided her toward a waiting vehicle. "Bye, Grandpa Reaper. See you tomorrow for painting." He raised his hand, throat too tight for words. The FBI convoy departed. Vincent's men withdrew once their leverage disappeared. Media got their footage of federal intervention and small-town corruption. Sheriff Garrett drove away looking 10 years older. The Iron Wolves stood down from defensive positions, slowly, bodies protesting hours of sustained readiness. Nobody celebrated. They'd held the line but won nothing except temporary safety. Bear found Marcus on the porch at sunset. "She'll be okay. FBI protection is solid. Until Vincent dies and his network realizes there's no reason to keep hunting her. So we make them realize. Permanently." Marcus looked at his oldest friend. "How?" "We go to the source. Vincent's in prison. Dying. Maybe it's time someone had a final conversation with him." The idea crystallized with brutal clarity. Vincent was the head of the snake. Remove him permanently, and the network would fracture, scatter, lose motivation to pursue 5-year-old grudges. Marcus stood. "Call Father Joe. Tell him I need last rites for someone who doesn't know they're dying yet." The words came out cold, final. Bear's expression showed understanding without judgment. Some decisions required ruthlessness that looked like evil from outside but felt like necessity from within. They rode to Florence Supermax the next morning, Marcus, Bear, Father Joe. The chaplain gained them access under the guise of providing spiritual comfort to a dying inmate. Guards led them to the medical wing, where Vincent Callahan occupied a private room, tubes and monitors tracking his body's final decline. He looked smaller than 5 years ago. Cancer had consumed the muscle left behind skeletal frame, barely recognizable as the man who'd terrorized Ashford. But his eyes remained sharp, aware, calculating. Mr. Dalton, come to gloat. Marcus sat beside the bed close enough that Vincent couldn't miss his expression. Come to make a deal. I don't make deals from deathbeds. Then you die knowing your network falls apart, your legacy erased, your name forgotten. Vincent's laugh turned into a cough that lasted 30 seconds. When he recovered, blood flecked his lips. What deal? Call off the hit on Lily. Call off everything. Die peacefully. In exchange, I make sure your nephew, the one running operations, now doesn't end up in a hole in the desert. Vincent's eyes narrowed. You'd protect my nephew. I'd ensure he goes to prison instead of a grave. Federal time is better than what the cartels do to people who lose their shipments. Why, boss? Because I'm tired of killing. Because this ends with you. Because I want to believe even monsters can choose mercy at the end. Vincent stared at the ceiling for a full minute. Marcus waited patient in the way only old men learn patience. Finally, Vincent spoke, voice barely above a whisper. There's a phone, hidden in the bathroom air vent. Get it. Father Joe retrieved a burner phone, handed it to Vincent. He dialed with shaking fingers, waited for connection. It's me. Cancel Project Lily. All of it. The girl's off limits. Forever. Pause. Because I'm dying and I'm tired and I don't want this to be what I'm remembered for. He ended the call, dropped the phone. Done. She's safe. How do I know you're not lying? Vincent smiled without humor. Because I'm a monster, but I keep my word. Always have. It's the only honor left. Marcus stood to leave. Vincent's voice stopped him. Wait, I need to tell you something. About Jake. What about him? I lied. 5 years ago when I said he flipped because I told him to. He really did it on his own. Conscience, maybe. Or love for his wife. But it wasn't planned. It wasn't theater. Relief and rage warred in Marcus's chest. Why lie? Because I wanted you to doubt. To wonder if you'd really won. To suffer like I was suffering. Vincent coughed again. But I'm dying now and lies seem pointless. Jake betrayed me because he chose to be better. That's the truth. Marcus nodded once and walked out. Behind him, Father Joe stayed, providing actual last rites to a man who probably didn't deserve them, but would receive them anyway because that's what mercy looked like. Vincent Callahan died 4 days later. Pancreatic cancer complications from pneumonia, body too weakened to fight. His obituary in the Denver Post mentioned his arrest and conviction, but nothing about the empire he'd built or the lives he destroyed. Jake Hoffman was released from Ashford County Prison 2 weeks after Vincent's death, having served 5 years of a 10-year sentence. Good behavior cooperation with federal investigations, genuine rehabilitation documented by prison staff. He walked out at 40 years old, looking nervous and uncertain, like a man who'd forgotten how to exist in normal society. Tommy waited in the parking lot. The brothers embraced Jake, crying without shame, Tommy holding him steady. Marcus watched from his truck parked across the street. He'd come to verify Jake's release, to assess whether the man who'd beaten Sarah had truly transformed into someone different. Jake spotted him, walked over slowly. I know you don't forgive me. I don't forgive myself. But I wanted you to know I'm staying in Denver. Halfway house. Got a job lined up at a veterans center, counseling guys with PTSD and addiction. Helping people like you used to be. Yeah, trying to stop them before they hurt someone the way I hurt Sarah. Marcus studied Jake's face, looking for manipulation or performance. Found only exhaustion and determination. Sarah and Lily are in witness protection. You won't see them. I know, that's right. That's fair. But tell her. Ida, tell her I'm sorry. And I'm trying, that's all. Marcus didn't promise to deliver the message, but didn't refuse either. Jake walked back to Tommy's car, and they drove away, two brothers trying to rebuild something from ruins. 6 months later, Memorial Day arrived with spring warmth and mountain flowers. The Iron Wolves gathered in Ashford for their 45th consecutive pilgrimage to Washington. But first, a local ceremony. Ashford's Vietnam Veterans Memorial Wall had been completed in April. Black granite, imported from Vermont, names of every local veteran who'd served etched in silver. Marcus's name appeared among them, still living, but honored regardless. The town gathered for the dedication. Speeches, tears, gratitude from civilians who'd never known war, but understood its cost. Sarah stood in the crowd with Lily. FBI had released them from protection after Vincent's death and the subsequent arrests of his network leadership. Hope House continued operating now, housing 15 women and helping dozens more through outpatient services. Marcus took the podium reluctantly uncomfortable with public recognition. His speech came out halting sincere. War taught me a lot. How to fight, how to survive, how to kill. But the real lesson, it taught me what's worth fighting for. Not flags or politics. People. He looked at Sarah and Lily. 5 years ago, a woman needed help. I was in a position to provide it. That's all heroism is. Being present when someone needs you. Doing what's right when it's easier to look away. Applause filled the small park. Marcus stepped down quickly, hating the attention, but understanding its necessity. Recognition reminded communities that veterans were neighbors, not strangers. That service continued long after discharge papers. Sarah approached after the ceremony. Thank you for everything. You did the hard part. You survived. You rebuilt. You're helping others do the same. Because you showed me it was possible. Lily tugged at his hand. Grandpa Reaper, can we paint mountains now? He laughed and lifted her onto his shoulders. Absolutely. The purple ones. They walked toward the parking lot where Iron Wolf's motorcycles gleamed in afternoon sun. Bear fell into step beside them. Boss, we're heading to D.C. tonight. You coming? Marcus looked at Lily on his shoulders at Sarah walking beside him, at the town he'd tried to leave but kept returning to because home wasn't a place but a collection of people who mattered. Yeah, we're coming. The ride to Washington took 3 days with stops for rest and reflection. 45 years of this pilgrimage, 45 years of remembering brothers lost, 45 years of proving that survivors kept their promises. At the wall, Marcus found familiar names etched in stone. Ran his fingers over letters that represented lives cut short, potential, never realized futures stolen by bullets and shrapnel in the casual violence of war. Tommy stood beside him in marine dress blues, having flown from Okinawa for the ceremony. 23 now seasoned by deployment, carrying himself with the quiet confidence of someone who'd found his purpose. Sir, I wanted you to know, I'm putting in my application for Marine Raiders, Special Operations. Marcus felt pride and fear in equal measure. That's tough training, tougher than infantry. I know, but someone told me once that the hardest paths lead to the most important destinations. Smart man. He is. Stupid old biker, but smart. They stood together watching sun set behind the wall, casting long shadows that stretched toward the future. Father Joe appeared beside them, age finally showing in his movements, but spirit undiminished. Beautiful evening. Marcus nodded. Lisa loved this place. Said it reminded her that remembering was how we honored the dead. She was wise. She was everything. Father Joe put his hand on Marcus's shoulder, and her legacy continues. Through you, through Sarah, through that little girl who carries her name. That's immortality, Marcus. Not fame or fortune. Lives touched. People saved. Love that ripples forward long after we're gone. Lily ran up, having escaped Sarah's supervision, to chase pigeons with Tommy's help. She grabbed Marcus's hand. Grandpa, who are all these names? Hero, sweetheart, men and women who didn't come home. Were they good people? Marcus thought about Bobby Chen and Tommy Rodriguez and all the brothers whose names surrounded them. The best. Like you, he knelt to her level. Better than me. Much better. She kissed his cheek and ran off to chase more pigeons. Sarah caught up, slightly out of breath. She's going to be the death of me. Or the life of you. She's got your artistic soul and my stubborn refusal to quit. God help us all. They watched Lily play in the fading light, this child born from tragedy, but growing into joy, carrying forward the promise that healing was possible and hope wasn't naive. The Iron Wolves mounted their bikes at dawn, preparing for the long ride home. Marcus led them out of Washington with the same precision he'd led them in 45 years of pilgrimages. Behind him stretched decades of memory. Ahead stretched whatever time remained. Bear pulled alongside. Boss, you ever think about retiring? Handing off leadership to someone younger? Marcus considered the question seriously. Every day, and every day I decide that's tomorrow's problem. Fair enough. They rode through Virginia mountains as morning sun painted the world gold. The road stretched ahead, familiar and infinite, each mile a meditation on the life Marcus had built from the ashes of war and loss. His phone buzzed with a text from Elena Rodriguez. She and Mia were settled in Denver working with Sarah at Hope House, helping other trafficking victims find their way back to humanity. Elena's message was simple. Thank you for giving us tomorrow. Marcus read it twice, feeling the weight of those 5 words. That's all anyone could do. Give people tomorrow when today had tried to kill them. Create space for healing when the world offered only continued trauma. He was 67 years old. His back ached. His knees hurt. He'd buried more friends than he could count and carried ghosts that would never rest. But Lily called him Grandpa Reaper, and Sarah had rebuilt her life, and Tommy was following footsteps Marcus had never meant to create, but was proud someone had found worth following. Legacy, purpose, meaning. Lisa had made him promise to keep living instead of surviving. He'd kept that promise, would keep it tomorrow, and the day after. For as long as breath filled his lungs and strength remained in his hands to grip the throttle, the Iron Wolves rode into whatever came next. Old men on motorcycles, warriors between battles, protectors of those who needed protecting. The road ahead was uncertain, always had been, always would be, but Marcus Dalton had never walked easy roads anyway.